Greetings, fellow travelers. Welcome to the 49th level of the RPG Cave. I'm one of your hosts, the level 99 human archmage, Ryan Turford, and I'm joined, as always, by the level 99 elf medic, Mr. Garret Bland. Garret, how are you doing this lovely Tuesday evening? I know it's not our normal night, but I hope you're doing okay nonetheless, good sir.
I'm doing okay. It's been a long day because I had to wake up for these online conferences. They like to be in different time zones. So I woke up like 4:30 in the morning
Oh
this
my
morning.
God.
And I'm gonna have to do the same thing tomorrow. So it
Good.
isn't that great. But other than that, I'm doing just fine.
God,
I'm doing really good. How about you?
You're such a trooper, Garret. I thought I had to wake up
Yeah.
early this morning because I had to wake up at 9 a.m. for the first time in a while. But you're definitely you definitely had it worse off than me. I'm doing okay. I mean, it's been an
Yeah.
interesting evening because I actually just got off work and it's been a crazy day, as you can
It's
imagine.
been a crazy day.
And then the Flames are just losing on top of that. So I'm excited though because I'm here talking about RPGs with you. So we can kind of
Yes.
put all that kind of on the back burner and have a great debate because we're probably just going to yell at each other for the
A
next
fantastic debate.
40 minutes. But it's a debate that's worthy of having because of course tonight's topic is the PS2 versus the Nintendo Switch. What is the best console for RPGs? But before we get into all that, let's clear the dungeon of the pesky mobs because we got to get these trash mobs out of here. We got to get to the raid boss. So folks at home, if you want to support the show, there's a number of ways to do that. Number one, if you're watching the live stream or just watching the VOD on YouTube, don't forget to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. Also, ding, ding, ding. Ring that bell for some notifications to be notified whenever we have all new videos coming up. All that stuff helps support the channel in a big way and helps people, discover the show. So thank you for that. Also, if you're listening to us on podcast feeds, whether it's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play, make sure to hit that subscribe button there as well. Also, if you want early access to this and all of our shows, head over to Patreon, patreon.com/carpoolgaming. We actually have some exclusive shows over there, including we did the first episode of The Geek Outs this week, where Sean and I talked about Scott Pilgrim for an hour and a half, and that's a Patreon exclusive show. But we're going to be doing kind of a spoiler cast for all of the Scott Pilgrim comics, and then we're going to do an episode about the movie afterwards as well. So that's all on Patreon as well. So go ahead and over to Patreon. And also here, by the way, we actually have our survey that we talked about last week.
Yes.
I want to say thank you to everyone who submitted things on the survey.
Thank you very much.
Some of the feedback is going to help in a big way. In fact, some of y'all might be receiving a Discord message from me later this week asking you to maybe be on the show with us. So make sure to check your Discord messages because I'm going to be reaching out to people this week. And likewise, if you haven't filled it out yet and you would like to be on the show, again, we've got a link to it in the show notes or the description of this video if you're on YouTube. So don't forget to just fill out that form if you're interested or if you just want to give us general feedback. If you want to tell us, what series you want us to cover, things like that. We even got, requests for specific episodes and we were even told they want specific guests, Garret. Which, again,
Yes.
this is new to Garret because I haven't even told them about some of the new stuff that came in over the last week. So we'll get to that a little bit later.
Sounds good.
But, and last but not least, we got a merch store. If you want your own RPG Cave shirt, if you want a shirt for the Xbox Drive or the Nintendo Drive, head over to merch store. Again, link is in the description as well. Well, without further ado, Garret, it's time to read from the sacred texts. And before we get into this, Garret, I want to really quickly acknowledge the chat because this came up while I was doing the intro from Genji37 saying, thank you for recommending Shin Megami Tensei 5. I finished it last night. What a great game. Garret, how do you feel knowing that you've spread you've spread the power of Shin Megami Tensei 5 beyond these walls?
First of all, I'm really glad that you really enjoyed it. I'm very jealous that you finished it. You finished it last night.
Yeah.
I am on this darn boss, Ryan, and for the life of me, why did I do this route? This ending, this secret ending I'm doing, it's hurting me. This is like one of the most rip the band-aid off of kind of I don't know how to explain it. It's just so hard, but I'm so close.
If you just
Shin
keep
Megami
going,
Tensei
Garret, you'll get there. You'll get there eventually. But it's probably it's because you're going for the secret ending, Garret. Of course it's going to take so much more effort to get to it, though.
It's my first attempt beating this boss. I am maxed out on my main character.
Yeah.
I'm maxed out. I can't do anything else. it's still just kicking my butt.
Yeah.
Like this game doesn't care. It's like, oh, you're max level. I don't care if you're max level.
Yeah.
You're going down still, and I'm like, jeez.
Well, Garrett,
Anyways,
imagine
that's my
how
pain.
how much worse it would be if you weren't max level. Like how much, like you'd probably die instantly.
I'm okay. We're not going into specifics here. I'll do that on Nintendo Shack, but I just thank goodness I saved certain items to like level up later on because they're limited and you can only get them once. And I did it at the very end. So I used my time wisely for maxing out the character. Now I gotta freaking figure out how to finish these bosses, but I will do that. I will do that before Shack, or else
I was just
Rebecca will
saying,
kick me out.
Elaine, you'll never hear the end of it from Elaine if you don't finish it.
That's true.
So
Yeah.
we can't have that. But anyways, back to our topic tonight. We're talking
Yes.
about the Nintendo Switch, represented by Garrett, and then
Hello.
I am representing the PlayStation 2. So we're going to kind of, talk about and decide on the show what is the best console of all time for RPGs. Now, I mean, to be fair, we're not talking about every console tonight, but when we really were thinking about this idea, I mean, it was really these two consoles that came to mind. I mean, the only other console that's probably in the running, or the two consoles that are probably in the running, are the Super Nintendo and the PlayStation 1 are the other two that I would maybe doing here. Or maybe we do like a separate debate and then maybe do like a tournament of champions, as it will.
Of all the consoles.
Yeah. But that will be a little bit harder to do because I know Garrett just hasn't played a lot of Super Nintendo RPGs. But I really think of these two. These are like the two strongest contenders as far as, the best console for RPGs. So I thought this would be the epic battle of titans that we definitely deserve to have here. So normally for a debate, Garrett, I don't do fun facts, but I've got fun facts for you tonight.
Let's do
About
some fun
what's
facts.
going on, because I want to set the stage a little bit. I want to tell the tale of the tape, as people in the showbiz would say, anyways. So, a lot of the stats I'm gonna pull up here, by the way, all pulled from Metacritic. Basically, what I wanted to do is kind of find like an even kind of source of information about the two consoles, kind of compare them equally, kind of outside of how Garrett and I essentially feel about them. So, Nintendo Switch, as far as number of RPGs on the console, Nintendo Switch has over 300 RPGs on the console that have been reviewed on Metacritic, and there's way more than that just on the store, because it's impossible to review every single Nintendo Switch game, because there's like 10,000 games on that console. So
Yeah, and it's like weekly, like at least, I don't know, 40, 50 games a week just coming into that store and just dumping a bunch of just separate things. But I would say over 300 RPGs that have been reviewed.
yeah,
That's a lot.
it's a lot of RPGs.
That's a lot of role-playing games to play. So
Yeah,
wow.
exactly. Whereas the PlayStation 2, much smaller library, and the PS2 really had a big reputation for RPGs in a lot of ways, but when you compare it against the Switch number, it's much smaller. 125 RPGs on Metacritic for the PlayStation 2, which is again much smaller number, but again, you have to remember the library itself is just, we're talking about like a library that's not even at 2,000 games essentially on the PlayStation 2.
So the fraction of RPGs that were, I guess, of notice or whatever, or the 125 RPGs there, it's like probably a higher fraction than Switch RPGs over the total amount of Switch games.
Exactly. But again, you have to keep in mind too, again, we don't have the full total for Switch either. It's just,
Right.
You just can't with that console.
You can't do that.
Now, as far as, Metacritic score, the PlayStation 2 has 3 games with a Metacritic score over 90. We've got Persona 4, Final Fantasy X, and Final Fantasy 12. Persona 4 and Final Fantasy X both had 90s, and then Final Fantasy 12 had a 92. So Final Fantasy 12 is the highest rated RPG on the PlayStation 2. And then the Switch has 5 RPGs with a Metacritic score over 90. You've got Bastion at 90, Dragon Quest XI S Echoes of an Elusive Age at 91.
Good one.
SteamWorld Heist at 91.
Nice.
Undertale at 93. And then Divinity Original Sin 2 is the highest rated RPG on the Nintendo Switch at 93 as well. Tied with Undertale, actually. So, those were not the games I was expecting to be at the top of the RPG list for Switch, specifically. Because like,
When I looked this up, the Metacritic list, and I saw Divinity Original Sin, the top Metacritic score based role playing game on Switch. I'm like, that's no. I don't believe this. There's
yeah,
so is that's an interesting I don't know, like handout of the score for Metacritic,
mhm.
especially with like Undertale and yeah, 3 out of the 5 RPGs are indie, right?
Yep. And not only
Right?
that, they also almost all of these started on other consoles and came to Switch, which is the interesting
That's
part
true.
about this too.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be a big theme as we kind of go through this as well, because whereas the PlayStation 2, like all three of the games I talked about were all PlayStation exclusives at the time on
Right.
the PlayStation 2, and this the top
Mm-hmm.
three makes perfect sense because Final Fantasy 10 and 12, for example, were like landmark games when they came out, and so is Persona 4. So it makes
Mm-hmm.
perfect sense that those would be the three at the top, and those were the ones I was kind of expecting, going to a list like this. But then when we get farther down, and again, I didn't list this next group because there's just too many games to list here. The PlayStation 2 has 25 RPGs with a Metacritic score above an 80, whereas the Nintendo Switch has 75 RPGs with a Metacritic score above an 80. So lots of quality
Interesting.
RPGs there. But again, when you do
Yeah.
kind of the ratio math, I think the PlayStation 2 comes out a little bit ahead on this because yes, 25 seems like a small number, but when you consider how many games are actually on the console, it comes out a little bit ahead when it comes to the ramifications there. So yeah, lots to chew on with this one. Of course, also I wanted to throw in there how many strategy RPGs were on these consoles as well. And Switch
Okay.
just dominates this category too. There's like over 200
Yes, it
strategy
does.
RPGs on Switch, whereas PlayStation 2 has 25. So it's just
Oh wow.
yeah, it's a total like sweep when it comes to the tail of the tape for these two consoles. So I figured we do this kind of like brief overview here, but then I wanted to break this down into kind of two categories for us to kind of talk about, and we're gonna talk about games in a little bit when we kind of revisit that because I want to talk about hardware first because I definitely think like this plays into it a little bit, and I mean. There's no hiding the fact that, the Switch is a portable console, whereas the PlayStation 2, yes, the PlayStation 2 Slim is this small, and you kind of can bring it with you. And I totally hit my microphone, by the way. But at the same time, like, it's not a portable console. I can't play this in the car
It's not.
without some serious effort to make that work, anyways.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, definitely the Switch has that as an advantage. Not only that, but and I thought I had my props in range here, but PlayStation 2 has memory cards as well. In order to save games, you basically have to have memory cards in your console. So if you don't have the memory cards, you can't save an RPG, which pretty much makes it pointless to play essentially, which is kind of crazy.
The memory cards were fairly priced compared to the Vita memory cards, right? Like
Yeah.
it was okay, right? To get a PS2 memory
Well,
card.
when the PS2 first came out, the PS2 memory cards
Hmm.
themselves were about $60 to $70 for
Jeez.
12 megabytes of memory, Garrett.
Hmm.
But
Yeah.
when eventually they came down in price pretty quickly, and they usually were in like
Okay.
the $10 to $20 range essentially, which again way
That's
cheaper
pretty
than
good.
buying like an SD card for your Switch. But your SD card for your Switch holds like 200 games on it versus
Yeah,
the
hold a
PS2
log. Okay.
doesn't do
I'm
that.
just trying to imagine a 12 megabyte memory card. What's the typical range of number of games you can save then with a
It's
12 megabyte?
it's entirely dependent on what games you play because some games
Okay.
take up like 100 kilobits, or some games take up the entire memory card. It depends on the game that you're playing. For
It's
example,
so tiny.
and this is a PS1 example that is fresh in my mind. Diablo on the PlayStation 1 takes up an entire PlayStation 1 memory card if you save with that game.
It's a Call of Duty.
Yeah,
I see.
it's a Call of
Okay.
Duty, exactly. So, which is why a lot of times, with people with memory cards for PlayStation 2 would have like a stack of them. And they would even sell you like in the package, like a little label that you could stick on it. So you could write like what each memory card essentially had on it.
Right. You buy multiple memory cards and you would swap out, right?
Yeah.
And to make sure you got the right save. I remember the game cartridges in the GameCube had the little
Yeah.
memory card slot up top. I'm like, why would I ever need this. I don't know. That's
But
what
you
I
needed
thought,
it to
but
save as well.
now it
That
makes
was the
sense.
problem because like
Yeah.
based consoles didn't have hard drives in them, so you couldn't save internally. So you had to have a
Hmm.
memory card of some kind. Essentially, it wasn't really
Yeah.
until the Xbox came out that we first had a console that had a hard drive in it. Essentially, which is just crazy to
Wow.
think about. Like, because yeah, the PS2 and the GameCube, you had to have memory cards for them. And which is why like you'd also hear stories about people buying a PlayStation 2 for the very first time and bringing it home with a game and then not knowing they needed a memory card. And then when they tried to save and they'd give an error message, they couldn't figure out why they couldn't save, and it was
Was that
because
a
they
lot
didn't
of
buy a memory card.
people?
You'd be surprised how many
Was that?
stories we heard about that
Oh
at the time.
wow.
That was a big thing.
That's kind of crazy.
It was like it was almost like the rite of passage when you got a PlayStation 2, Garrett. It was like figuring out that you needed a memory card for it.
Yeah, well, PS2 was a very popular console outside the gaming space because of the disc-based
Yeah.
software, and it essentially was a DVD player
Mhm.
that could be on price or cheaper than a
Yeah.
DVD player itself.
Yeah,
So
that was when DVDs were
yeah.
first starting to come out, and it was like for many
Hmm.
people their very first DVD player because it was cheaper than buying a DVD player at the time. Because DVD players when they first came out were stupidly expensive. They were like $500 to $800 for a DVD player.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
Might as well get a PS2.
yeah, might as well get a PS2 at $300 or whatever it was going for at the time, anyways.
Hmm.
But it's also the main reason why we saw it sell so well in emerging markets like stuff like places like Brazil, for example. The PS2 was
Hmm.
a huge console for that reason because a lot of people were buying it for the DVD player, but then also getting games for it as well, anyways. Because the PS2
Hmm.
definitely of that era between it and the GameCube and the Xbox was the dominant console, like heads and
It was,
tails
yeah.
above every console. In fact, there were very few games besides anything made by Microsoft or Nintendo first party that came out for anything besides the PlayStation 2. Essentially,
Mhm.
you didn't really have like a lot of third party exclusives unless they physically couldn't run on the PlayStation 2. Which we saw
Mhm.
with stuff like Otogi, for example, for the original Xbox, because that's a From Software game. But because of the giant environments in that game, like the only console that could run that was the Xbox, essentially. So that's why it ended up there.
Interesting.
Essentially. But yeah, so it's a really interesting dynamic. Whereas the Switch is an interesting story because, again, it's like even though it's not the most powerful console nowadays, it has a lot. In fact, actually, this is a parallel with the PlayStation 2 because at the time the PlayStation 2 was also not the most powerful console either. But the
Right.
Switch is definitely the most popular console of this console generation. I mean, yes, the PS5, for example, they can't keep it in stock because of the demand and the chip shortage, sure. But I think all things considered, even if it was in stock constantly, I think the Switch would still be a more popular console, especially outside North
I
America.
agree with you. Yeah, and we just heard news that the Switch just outsold the PS4.
Yeah.
And PS4 was widely popular, right? It had a huge legging over the Xbox One, and now Switch, I think the novelty behind, the handheld form factor and the way, you can connect that to the TV, it was really revolutionary. Like it wasn't too long ago. It was 5 years ago. And it's just like, wow, that's a concept. And especially for me, I'm mainly an handheld player. I like to play all the Game Boys and DSs and my PS Vita. I was so relieved to have a home console like gameplay on the next Nintendo console, which is the Switch. And even though it is on 2016 dated mobile processors, it's still packing a punch. It's still I'm playing okay, so role playing games, I don't know about you, Ryan, but they really don't need to be graphically demanding or system demanding in order to make it a really good RPG. Of course, there is some like that
Yeah.
out there on the Xbox and PlayStation, but the fact that there's so many role-playing games that were willing to port to this thing and actually just from the beginning to end develop on this thing, even though there's other systems that are much more advanced, it's kind of telling how popular it was to have an RPG machine, basically. It reminds me of the 3DS and DS in a sense, like that combination of role-playing genre, just wants to be on the handheld, just go after the grind over and over, but on the Switch. on a handheld device, but you can go straight to the TV if you want to and make a home console experience.
Yeah, it was really like everything I wanted the PlayStation Vita to be, because the PlayStation Vita
Yeah.
was also an incredible console for RPGs, but it's just one of those things where you couldn't play it on your TV, and it missing that element definitely hurt for someone like me who loves playing, RPGs on my TV, but then also being able to take them on the go. Like, I love that about the Switch and how it's really flexible in that way. Whereas, the Vita and other portable consoles is tough because it's like, especially if I'm not commuting, for example, it's tough to, want to sit on my bed and play a PlayStation Vita game or something like that. Like, that's just not the way I consume games anyways. Whereas the Switch, I feel like, is much better for something like that. I feel like, especially because, again, you can play it on your TV, or again, if you want to lay in bed and you really feel like playing portably, you have that option too. But there are also games like, like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, which I would argue definitely is hurt by its performance on the Switch specifically, because of the Switch hardware. But we know that they mostly fixed that with Xenoblade Chronicles Definitive Edition, so that's not really an issue now in particular. But there are times where that does happen. But it's also kind of similar to a conversation that's happening right now in current news with, the PlayStation 1 games coming to PlayStation 5, and they're running in the PAL versions, which for RPGs,
so weird.
Even though the game itself is more sluggish, it's like, well, it's a most RPGs are turn-based on the PlayStation 1, so it doesn't matter too much. But you don't always feel like that for every game. Exactly. But I want to bring in two of our listeners who wrote in about this hardware specifically. We're going to start with Genji37, who says both libraries are pretty stout, but I don't think either has an advantage there. I think the Switch wins purely on being a hybrid console. I didn't realize having your RPGs on the go and on the big screen would be that important to me until the Switch came around. And then similar thing came from Mike at BlazeKnight0923, who said, even though the Switch leaves out some classic RPGs, including some of my personal favorites, I still give the edge to the Switch for portability, HDMI, widescreen, and the ever-expanding library of games. So, yeah, I mean, the proof is in the pudding right there. I think we both agree, even though this is supposed to be a debate, and we're supposed to be arguing about this. I mean, I can't argue that the Switch is not a better piece of hardware than the PlayStation 2. It'd be wrong to say so.
Yeah, a caveat to it is just like it comes with a package though with the performance of the Switch in its games. Like, for example, Witcher 3. Would I recommend it on Switch? Absolutely not. Do not play it on a Switch. And like, if you are doing it because that's the only system that you have in order to play Witcher 3, it's like, well, I'm just going to let you know it's going to be a lesser, worse experience for you because the performance is not there. I can name off other types of role-playing games that are like that, like Outer Worlds, Monster Hunter Stories 2, even Monster Hunter Rise. Even though it's a stable 30, it's much better on PC. And it's just like these games, it depends. Like, do you want to have that convenience of portability and want to play on handheld and on the go with your Switch, or would you rather have just a smooth performance experience? And like, I'm sure, I don't know. Can you like have some kind of like information about the performance on role playing games for the PS2? I'm sure they were fine. I'm sure.
Most of them run good to go. Most of them run anywhere between 30 and 60 frames per second, depending on the game. There's like barely any dips in just about any RPG that you might find. Like, the only one that I wouldn't recommend maybe is the original Monster Hunter, but I think it's more just due to like clunky controls more than anything, because like Capcom was trying to learn how to do a game like that, I think, and I think that just led to some issues. But I mean, for the most part, like all the RPGs that they play really solidly on the PlayStation 1. You do obviously have some load times, but I think the load times on PlayStation 2 are faster than the Switch load times sometimes. It depends on the game, but I think sometimes like the load times can actually be quite a bit faster on PlayStation 2. Also, some other highlights and benefits that it has over the Switch. For example, because it's an old console, you don't have online updates, or you don't have to install any games. There's no DLC, there's no patches. Once you put a disc in, that's it. That's the final product essentially. It's also a PS1 as well. Like, Sony essentially took the PS1 hardware and put it on the board for the PlayStation 2, and it plays every game in the PS1 library without any issue because it doesn't emulate the games. It actually plays them through hardware straight from the motherboard. So it essentially is a PlayStation 1 and it's two consoles in one, essentially. So you've got an entire library of games if you wanted to expand outside the PlayStation 2 library. There's also the entire library of the PlayStation 1 at your disposal as well, including the fact that literally it has all the same ports for your controllers and your memory card, so you literally just plug everything in that you already have for your PlayStation 1. It all just works. And it also has like some great scaling options as well if anyone is looking to get into the PlayStation 2 for the first time. If you have a modern television, for example, because it actually has component out on it in 1080p if with certain games. But for the most part, it also runs at 480p as well. That's what most games of that era kind of ran in. But then you've got a lot of great upscaling devices like the RetroTink 5X, or there's a lot of great ways out there to kind of, upscale your games to either 1080p or 4K and make them look all nice on your PlayStation 2, while still also having all the extra benefits of playing on an old system like this one. So there are some good reasons to go back to a console like this. And of the older consoles, I definitely think it's like one of the best consoles to revisit as far as, both the overall library outside of RPGs, but also it's got a great controller. The DualShock 2, I think, is a great controller. It's definitely more comfortable than playing with the Joy-Cons, Garrett. I got to tell you that right now. It just is.
Yeah, I'm wondering prices of PS2s these days. Are they okay?
You can get like a PS2 Slim like this one for about 80 to 90 Canadian dollars.
That's not bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's assuming it's like in like super good condition with all the cables and everything you need at the price I quoted you. Otherwise, you could get a more beat up one, or even like an older PlayStation model, like the launch PlayStation 2 model, for cheaper than that. You can get one for like a good, launch PlayStation 2 model for like $40 or $50 with a controller.
Yeah, I remember my friend having a PS2. I think he had a launch PS2, and that even actually looked kind of dope. It had a good form factor.
Yeah, it definitely looks cool, but the downside to the old PlayStation 1 or PlayStation 2 is that there's a really big fan on the back of it. It can be kind of loud sometimes, or it can totally go out and then you're kind of screwed with your console. You basically
done.
Replace it. Yeah.
I heard there's something to do with maybe it's the PS3, but the CD reader eventually gives out. Like the laser gives out. Okay. Yeah. So
that's with every CD console though. I mean, that'll even happen to our Xbox Ones and PlayStation 4s one day, essentially, where it's just the laser doesn't last forever. But the nice thing, for example, with a PlayStation 2, it's very quick. Like if you take it to a repair shop, it's actually very easy to repair because this part
it's
here
right
just
there.
like screws off and it's right there. So it's really easy to replace the disc drive on something like this. It's a little bit tougher on the PlayStation 2 as well.
Too.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if someone sold like that X screen, with the PS2, like, the PS1 portable TV thing too. Yeah. I'm wondering, I'm sure
there is something like that for PlayStation 2 as well, where you can take it on camping trips with you and stuff like that. Like, I had a friend who used to do that because he would use it as his DVD player that he would take camping with him, essentially. So he could watch, his DVD copy of Goodfellas while on the road, essentially, or whatever movie they wanted to watch. But yeah, again, I definitely think if you're going to invest in like an older console, like you can't go wrong with the PS2. I think the PS2 is a great, older console to play to jump into. And again, it's got a lot of great games on it, which we're going to transition to now, Garrett. But overall, I think, the Switch wins the hardware argument, no question. But the PS2, it's no slouch, especially when it comes to older
No slouch at all.
Yeah. But let's talk about some of these games, Garrett. And first of all, I know you're going to bring up a bunch of these games here because I think there's going to be some back and forth here. But I want to bring in Ngachacha, who brings in his own list of, if you will, Garrett, of Switch-specific RPGs that he wants to throw in here.
Yeah.
Ngachacha says, Switch all the way, Golf Story, Octopath Traveler, Triangle Strategy, Fire Emblem Three Houses, Mario plus Rabbids, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Shin Megami Tensei 5, and Sports Story will be the indie game of the year when it drops in 2022. So Ngachacha bringing the heat with a lot of cool games on the Nintendo Switch. Garrett, what do you think about both Ngachacha's list and then I want to hear what games you wanted to bring to the table for this argument.
I mean, that's a good start of a great list. I absolutely love Fire Emblem Three Houses, Mario plus Rabbids, Xenoblade Chronicles. Well, I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles 2 yet. That's next on the list. I played a good portion of it. I just want to restart it. And then, yeah, Shin Megami Tensei 5. Great stuff. I don't know if I want to list like way more RPGs than there already is because there's such a breadth
Yeah.
of RPGs on the Switch. I mean, there's so much variety too. Like you got action RPGs like Astral Chain, and you can do, strategy tactics games like, Fire Emblem Three Houses or Mario plus Rabbids. It's a good introduction, accessible role-playing game to just the typical gamer. And then you got indie RPGs, which he mentioned is Sports Story. I think of Bastion and Transistor. And then SteamWorld Heist. I did not realize that was going to be scored so highly on the Switch, but it is. You got so many role-playing games actually kind of ported into, right, from so many other different consoles too. You got Divinity Original Sin 2. Mm-hmm. Can you imagine, like, if you would have told me 4 years ago, 3 years ago, it's like, hey, this game on PC, Divinity Original Sin 2, is going to be portable and playable on the next Nintendo console. I'd be like, you are smoking something, sir. That is not believable whatsoever. And, they pull some magic there. Like, it is good. It is playable. And what I really enjoy about that one in particular in Witcher 3 is that it's cross-save with PC. So some developers enabled that cross-save cloud features. And so, yeah, I just want to mention that, the RPGs in Switch, they're great. And then there's such a diversity of them, from turn-based games, like first-party Nintendo games to third-party games, and then of course ports from all different kind of far endpoints of the RPG spectrum. You're gonna be full with your RPG kind of itch on the Nintendo Switch. Even if you just come in right now and they just stop right here, it's like you're good. You'll be on this thing for quite a while. So yeah, that's just what I want to mention about Switch.
That's a pretty easy thing to say for a console that has like 300 plus RPGs on it. Like it's ridiculous.
Just saying, man,
like there's so much choice, which is just the crazy part about the Switch when you really think about it. And in fact, the hilarious thing, Garrett, when we were talking about Metacritic and how like 2 of the 3 best rated PlayStation 2 games are on Switch as well, with portable versions that actually like Final Fantasy 12, for example, is a better game on Switch than it is on PlayStation 2. Because it's got all the extra content they added for.
It's got like, the improvements.
The Japanese release it for it. So it's just like, you've got that there. I mean, in fact, when Persona 4 eventually comes to Switch, that's the last one where us PS2 fans are hanging on to, essentially from the 90 plus.
I'll see how it goes.
Metacritic club, anyways. It'll happen eventually, Garrett. I would be shocked if it didn't. But as for me, of course, with my rebuttal, Garrett, because I think you brought some good games there, and Ngachacha also brought a good list as well.
Yes,
the Muffin Mon on Discord asks the question: as someone who missed the PlayStation 2 generation, what are the must-play JRPGs on the system? I love my Switch, and I think it has some phenomenal JRPGs. Of course, he also mentions Fire Emblem Three Houses, Tokyo Mirage Sessions, Triangle Strategy, etc. But Kevin wants to know what PS2 games are must-play games, and I'm happy to answer that. I want to know too with my counter argument. So I brought 10 games that I wanted to mention here as well, and I specifically picked these games because, except for one case, which I'll mention, that are not on any other consoles besides the PlayStation 2. So you have to have a PlayStation 2 to play these games, which is kind of like a big crux of this argument.
That's nice, actually. Yeah.
Yeah. First one, I saw Yarden mention this in the chat. There's no Persona games besides Persona 5 Strikers on the Switch, but PS2 has lots of Persona games, including Persona 3 FES. I've talked about it on the show many times. It's one of my favorite games of all time. It's an amazing RPG. And it only exists on the PlayStation 2 for now. We did get a port of Persona 3 on the PSP in Persona 3 Portable, but even though they added like a nice, chunk of game to that game, It's missing all the FMV cutscenes. It's missing a whole bunch of stuff. Like it's missing a lot of the open world exploration elements of the FES version. So I think it's actually a worse version to play into versus the FES version, which is great because again, it came out after the game came out, so it's kind of like the golden version equivalent of Persona 3, where it has like a separate, epilogue that takes place after the end of the game, where you play as a different character essentially in the FES version, and it kind of expands on the story in some interesting ways, and also adds some unique costumes and different weapons and armor and different enemies that are unique to that version of the game versus the original Persona 3. So had to include it there because, us, we're Persona people, so we got to throw a Persona game on there. But then, I played for the very first time this year, I talked about this on the show not too long ago, Valkyrie Profile 2, Silmeria, which I think is an incredible RPG from Square Enix. It's kind of their take on Norse mythology, but in the form of a turn-based RPG, and it's incredible as well. Again, you've got the combat system has 4 of your party members, and they're all mapped to your D-pad buttons, and you're basically, performing a bunch of combos in battle with them. So even though it is turn-based, it feels a lot more involved with the action than a lot of other turn-based RPGs, and I think it's got a really great story, great cast of characters, and just really fun combat. So had to mention that there. Next one is a trilogy of games, again, exclusive to PlayStation 2. The Xenosaga trilogy from Monolith, exclusive to PlayStation 2. Fantastic trilogy of games. I know that a lot of people love these games, but the only downside to these ones, they're very expensive because, especially 3, because they made very little of that game, and that game's like $400 now if you want a complete copy of it.
Right.
But it's amazing. So you got to check the Xenosaga games out. I just hope one day they come to Switch or something else at this point, just to drive the price down more than anything for the PlayStation 2 version.
Just to let it be accessible somewhere other than emulation. That would be great. I'm thinking hopefully Sony's new PlayStation Classics, whatever, just continuously adds in a bit more. I don't know. Who has the copyrights to Xenosaga? Is it?
It's Bandai Namco.
Bandai has it. Okay, so Bandai is able to,
I don't know.
Collaborate with Sony about it, right?
Now, I don't know how much Monolith owns the IP or not, as far as, re-releasing the game. That might play into it where they might have to get, Nintendo's permission to re-release the game on other platforms. I don't exactly know how much, that works anyways. But it would be awesome to see it on the, the PS2 service on
just somewhere.
Plus. Or just literally somewhere else.
I'm sure Bandai could package it up and sell it for $60. Yeah. Remade it like trilogy, just and put it out there.
I mean, they put Cosmos, the main character from Xenosaga, in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. She's one of the weapons that you find in that game, essentially. So
that's a neat little Easter egg.
Yeah.
See, we got Monolith exclusives too. Okay, we got Xenoblade Chronicles 1 and 2. So there you go. And they're expensive. The special edition ones are.
I actually think Xenosaga is probably better, but that's just my opinion.
Oh, interesting.
But Next up, we got lots of Tales of games on the PlayStation 2. I wanted to highlight Tales of.
You can have this.
I wanted. Oh, geez, Garrett, don't make me stop. So, Tales of Legendia is the one I wanted to highlight here. This was the first Tales game that came out in the PlayStation 2. It's basically about a brother and sister that are kind of like shipwrecked on this, lost island, and the sister basically gets kidnapped, and you as the brother basically form like this ragtag group to basically hunt her down, rescue her from the kidnappers, essentially. But of course, there's a lot more going on there because it's this big fantasy world, and there's more to it than just that. So I really like that game a lot. I think it's really great. Speaking of games I really like, though, a lot, Dragon Quest VIII on the PlayStation 2. Fantastic game. I had to include it here, despite the fact that it's on the 3DS as well.
It's on the 3DS. That is correct.
Not on the Switch, but 3DS.
No, on the Switch.
No, Switch only has, Dragon Quest 1, 2, and 3, Garrett. It's missing Dragon Quest 8 at this point. But Dragon Quest 8, one of the best, 3D Dragon Quest games.
Yeah, it only has 1, 2, 3, 11S, and it has Dragon Quest Builders 1 and 2, and Dragon Quest Heroes.
Right.
I think, yeah.
Yeah, because I remember that Dragon Quest Heroes being Japan exclusive for a bit, and then it came to North America. And then we still got, the Switch also has Dragon Quest X in Japan only, which is the Dragon Quest MMO as well.
It's the MMO, which okay, yeah, sure.
Well, they made
Cool.
an offline version of it, Garrett. I don't know if you knew that, where they actually made like a single player only version
Did they
of it, but
did
it's
they
only in
release it
Japan
though?
only. It's out in
Only in
Japan
Japan.
only. Yeah,
Super weird.
which sucks because like
Good for them.
I really want to play that game too. But next
Mm-hmm.
up, Shadow Hearts Covenant. I talked about that on the show when we did our best non-standard environment for JRPG show. Where that's the game that takes place in the 1920s in this weird fantasy version of it, and that game is awesome. I was actually replaying it pretty recently for something I'm working on, and that game still holds up really well. I think it's a great
Cool.
game. We've also got Wild Arms 5. In fact, we've got Wild Arms 3, 4, and 5 on the console, but Wild Arms 5 is definitely the standout as well. They wanted to basically do this big kind of anniversary for the Wild Arms series, which of course was like the Wild West role-playing game from Sony, and that game is really solid. I also wanted to throw in here Sakura Wars So Long My Love, which is also on the Wii specifically, but it's basically a strategy RPG, but also a dating sim at the same time. And that game is really fun as well. It takes place in like a steampunk version of the 1920s in New York, where you're basically playing as this theater group that performs theater shows, but also doubles at night as like this like force that rides around in mechs and kills demons. It's really 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 cool. So
Interesting. I've heard of this. I thought it was on Switch, but no, it's just on PS4.
yeah.
And originally, I
Well,
guess
they
on
have
PS2.
a new Sakura Wars
new
because they
one.
did a reboot of
Got it.
a couple years ago, which is also a
Cool.
good game too, but only on PlayStation 4. And then my last two real quick ones, I got Suikoden 3, which is a really good Konami RPG series, going all the way back to the PlayStation 1. But Suikoden 3 was the first one we got on PlayStation 2, and it still really holds up really well. You basically recruit a big cast of characters. You got about 50 characters you can recruit in that game, and it's got a great story. And I'll be talking about that more, I think, in the next couple of weeks with maybe a special guest, wink, wink, provided that they reply back to my Discord message this week. And then last on the docket, Rogue Galaxy, which is also going to be part of the PlayStation 4 Plus service as well. So if you're getting the premium service, you can check this one out. This is basically like Level 5, who is the maker of, Dark Cloud 1 and 2, as well as some other RPGs. It was kind of their take on Star Wars, essentially. It's not a Star Wars game, but it's essentially like the same kind of storyline as Star Wars, where a young it's like a space opera, and you're kind of like playing a character that kind of is orphaned on like a desert planet, and he meets up with a plucky group of heroes, and they go on a big adventure across different planets together. It's a really really fun game, definitely one that came out towards the end of the PlayStation 2 life cycle that I know a lot of people missed. So I wanted to throw that in there as well. So Garrett, lots of games there. I could have gone on and on and on because there's a lot of really like awesome class of PS2 games, but more than anything, what I really found when kind of, preparing for this episode and kind of looking at more into, PlayStation 2 games that maybe I haven't checked out yet. I think the big thing that rings to me anyways about PlayStation 2 RPGs is just originality, like developers trying all kinds of crazy stuff, like throwing ideas at the wall just to see what would stick, essentially, is what I would describe a lot of PS2 RPGs being. And it led to some of the best franchises that we still have around today, even on the Switch, originating on the PlayStation 2. You've got, series like Disgaea, you've got Persona, where that really hit its stride. The Tales series really hit its stride on the PlayStation 2. That's where it really became popular. There's a lot of series that are really like that really, found popularity because it was on the PlayStation 2, on a console that was so ubiquitous. And I think now and it's been a long time since we've seen a console be that way until the Switch, which is also why I think this makes for kind of a great comparison between the two, because I think they're really similar in a lot of ways. And I think when it comes to what I just described, I think they're very similar to that. What do you think about that idea, Garrett?
I mean, PS2 just sounds like there's a lot of great role-playing games that I never thought to, I never got into during that time. I did not have a PS2. I did not really get into RPGs at the time. So you listing and explaining these games, I'm like, those they sound kind of cool. They sound like games that I would like to actually play, and hopefully, Sony brings in some of these games into the new PlayStation Plus service. And, if they bring enough RPGs into that that service, that would actually kind of convince me. It's like, okay, let me just rent this for a month and just check it out.
Mhm.
Yeah, like it's interesting to hear the kind of the like the highlights of the PS2 RPGs. I remember hearing some of these like Suikoden and
Mhm.
like Rogue Galaxy and stuff like that. So it really sucks that I can't really play it unless I do other things than,
Right.
buy a PlayStation and get the games. I'm not a collector too, so I'm not gonna go on my way buy a PS2
Yeah, you don't have a big
and
shelf
get
like
these
this one
games
with all
too.
kinds of stuff on it.
I don't have a big shelf. No, I don't. And the thing is, I'm always looking forward to the games that are here now.
Mhm.
And that's why I really like the Switch too, because it's kind of the best of both worlds.
Yeah.
Like you got all the games that are role-playing games that are coming up that I even mentioned that's coming out this year. You got Live Alive, you got Xenoblade Chronicles 3, Fire Emblem Three Hopes, and Bayonetta 3. Those are four fantastic, or we don't know if they're fantastic, but four
Mhm.
AAA role-playing games that are coming out. I think all of them exclusively on the Switch. Wait, is Live Alive exclusive as well?
I mean, Square Enix is cagey about it. I would imagine it ends up
Uh,
being like,
it's a timed exclusive.
well, I think,
Okay.
okay, I think Nintendo is publishing it as well, but that didn't stop,
Nintendo is publishing
but
it, yeah.
but they also published Octopath Traveler and it came to Xbox. So who knows? Who
Okay.
knows at this point?
They are promoted into the Switch platform. Like Live
Yeah.
Live was, shown off. But anyways, yeah, these, great role-playing games that are coming up on the Switch, and then there's so many previously. I wish they would bring more PS2 role-playing games that are non-Sony published, of course,
Right.
onto the Switch.
Mhm.
That would be, and especially I don't know what it is, but I love the handheld factor of the Switch. They
Yeah.
just really nailed it. Of course, the Joy-Cons, you could probably switch them for different grips and just be fine if you want more action-paced type of game. I wish the Tales series
Mhm.
made. I mean, they've had one. I
Yeah, we have
wish
Tales
they
of
had
Vesperia. That's
more.
the only one, and that's a good game. But yeah, it's
Mhm.
the only one that's made it there
It's
so far.
not Berseria or something like that. Or I just want to see just more classic role-playing games that are. It seems long forgotten to
Mhm.
be. It's like, hey guys, put it on the Switch. It'll give it new life.
Right.
A lot of people will get it. Put it on sale. Like it's gonna be an easy port. Well, I don't know if it's gonna be an easy port for you, but
It depends.
probably depend game to game. But if it is easy and accessible, why not? Put it on the Switch. But anyways, yeah, that's what I thought about it. It's just PS2 sounds like a cool machine
Mhm.
back in the day, a great role-playing game machine that I wish some of its games just came to the Switch so I can play them.
Yeah, definitely. Or just any consoles, because even if it comes to
Or
PlayStation
any
4
console,
or
yeah.
PlayStation 5, like, PlayStation 4s in particular are very accessible. And I mean, from what we've already seen from the PlayStation 1 games on PlayStation 5, like, there's no difference between playing those games on PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5. So that's an important note as well.
Basically,
Like,
yeah.
you don't need a PlayStation 5 to try all those out and have, like, the same great experience with that, which is why, like, again, we've got some of these RPGs in stuff like Rogue Galaxy that is on PlayStation 4 already, but I just want to see, more of that stuff come to modern consoles for the reasons you talked about, Garrett, because I think a lot of these games are worth exploring, but you're right, like, not everyone wants to go out there and have, like, a big, massive physical game collection. Like,
Yeah.
I'm definitely the minority when it comes to the idea of game collecting, where I like having the physical stuff, but I'm also just by nature a very old school kind of person where I'm more likely to
Mhm.
go out there and rewatch old movies or replay old games versus playing a lot of new games, to be honest. And the way I look at it too is interesting, where if it's an old game but I've never played it before, then as far as I'm concerned it's new to me, so I look
Yep.
at it as like a new game. It just happens to have like an old school design sensibility to it. But as long as I go in with that mindset, I'm like, yeah, I'm super excited to crack open, a lot of the cases on my shelf that there are also a lot of games I have that I just haven't played yet or haven't gotten to yet, but I
Mhm.
know I will at some point, because it's just that retro games are definitely going up in price. So that is a factor that plays into this
Mhm.
as well, which again, to your point, Garrett, I just hope we see a lot more of this stuff come to newer platforms anyways. So
Yeah.
Garrett, if we had to crown the champion between these two heavyweight consoles, which are you going to crown the RPG winner, the best console to play RPGs on?
Well, personally for me, it's got to be the Switch just because of my experience with it. Again, PS2 sounds like a great console, sounds like a great role-playing game console at the time, and probably still is if you have the means and the efforts to do so.
Mhm.
But just the portability of this thing, and as you said, it has a lot of old ported improved games like the Final Fantasy 10 and 12, and then other types of ported role-playing games over from PC.
Mhm.
You could just have a whole like just breadth of RPGs on the Switch, and you can't go wrong like choosing a game on the Switch. You got action, you got turn-based, you
Yeah.
got indie, you got strategy. I mean, what more can you ask for other than just bring more games to the
Yeah.
Switch?
I will
So,
say it is not impossible to get pick out a Switch game that's also really bad though, Garrett. So I mean, I mean,
yes.
because there are so many good games, or there's also just so many more bad games on the Switch in particular because there is just a lot of shovelware on the Switch as well to be careful of. Whereas
Yes.
the PlayStation 2, it's just a much smaller library, and they actually had to publish all those games, so the chances of running into a 20 on Metacritic are much less likely on a PlayStation 2 versus
And they all work.
and they all
They
actually
all
work when you
perform
play
pretty
it.
well.
Yeah. Whereas I actually probably agree with you. I think definitely the Switch is probably the best place to play the RPGs and nowadays, and also I think it's honestly probably got the best RPG library of pretty much any modern console. I could see
Mhm.
the argument for maybe something like PlayStation 4 versus Switch,
Me too.
but it's also a crossover between like that they have so many of the same games that it's almost
Yeah.
they're almost inseparable at this point. Like even stuff like Trails of Cold Steel and The Witcher, like you talked about, Garrett, like they're on both at this point. So there's a lot of
Well,
series that
the
come to
weird thing
PlayStation
is
2
Trails
and
of
Switch.
Cold Steel 1 and 2 are not on Switch.
Yeah,
I don't know why. Just I think they're porting it over in the future, but it's just like having 3 and 4 and not 1 and 2 on the Switch, it just baffles me, and you shouldn't play
I mean,
Trails of Cold Steel on
it
Switch.
baffles me more too because they're doing we with the PlayStation Plus premium service. They're bringing over Trails of Cold Steel 1 and 2 as PlayStation 3 streamed games, but
Oh no.
not the PlayStation 4 versions. So it's just like
Oh
I'm just
no.
like, what are you guys doing? What are you doing over there?
You
Why are you
can't
doing this to us?
save 40 hours fast forwarding the animations
Yeah, exactly.
in the game. Wow.
Good
Kind of
lord.
crazy.
But yeah, so we both agree. I
Anyway.
think Switch is definitely the champion, but PS2 is no slouch. And definitely, again, if you're
Mhm.
looking to start getting into retro collecting, like the PS2 is the best place to start, I would say. Like,
Oh, really?
Probably the best console to
Cool.
start with. But before we go, Garrett, we got a question that has nothing to do
Oh,
with the topic we talked about tonight. So we got to answer this one as well.
nice.
This comes to us from the Don Rob at Rob Duggan on Twitter, and he asked the question: Have either of you played Triangle Strategy, full game or the demos? If so, what are your thoughts on the game? I'm about 5 hours in and I'm loving it. Playing it because Bland Explosion recommended this on Shack a few weeks back. So, Garrett, have we played Triangle Strategy? I think we talked about this on the show before, but we'll reiterate it for the Don Rob, who I think is a newer listener, by the way. So shout out to the Don Rob
Yes.
for checking out the show and for writing in questions, by the way.
Yes, thank you, the Don Rob. I have it.
Yeah.
I have not opened it, but I have it. So I played the demo. And it was about 3 hours or whatever. It's really good. And that's why I recommended it to people. It's like, hey, check out the demo. It's really, really good. And if you like it, go and get it. And now I got it too. I gotta beat this stupid Shiva boss on 5. I gotta sink my teeth into Xenoblade Chronicles 2, because man, oh man, I want to play 3.
Yeah.
But Triangle Strategy is definitely like, oh, you better play this year. And I might not finish it this year, but you better play it this year.
I mean,
That's all I'm about to say.
Garrett, if you don't, I will shake my head at you, and I might not even invite you to our best RPGs of the year conversation if you don't play it.
Probably, because the demo's so good. It really is very, very good, and that's why I recommend. Because I was so excited for it. I'm like, I can't believe I don't have this game on me, but I just like I couldn't finish. Like, I would have so much guilt in my heart if I just gave up Shin Megami Tensei 5 right
No,
then and there.
you
I was
gotta
like,
finish
no,
it.
I can't do it.
Yeah, your Shack teammates are very, very on the ball to make sure to tease you about it. So
Yes.
that, to then push you over the finish line to actually finish it. I definitely endorse that action. But yeah, you definitely got to play it at some point. But again, to your point, Garrett, I think what the demo does so well is that it gives you enough of a slice of the game to tell you whether or not this game is for you. And if you really like the demo, then you're going to love the game. Because as someone who's played the game, because I've finished it, like, I'm telling you right now, if you played the demo, play it first, by the way, if you haven't, done so yet. And then you'll know at the end of the demo if this game is for you. And if it is, you're going to love the full game. I think you're really going to enjoy it from there. And your save carries over too, which is the best part. There's no feel bads when it comes to the demo. Like you should always play the demo first with a game like this because your save carries over anyways. And it's just the same game anyways. But then you're not, financially invested in it until, 3 hours in anyways, when you're ready to pick up the full game. But I'm very excited to talk to you about Triangle Strategy, hopefully later this year, after all the other RPGs come out. But we'll see. But anyways, Garrett, we should probably wrap up the show. But before we go, Garrett Plugs go.
You can follow me on Twitter at Bland Explosion, and you can find me on the Nintendo Shack, part of the Play Some Video Games Podcast Network. We are live over at twitch.tv/PSVG, typically Thursday nights, and we also release everywhere, like Apple and Google and Amazon and everywhere else, Pocket Cast, I don't know, all the podcast things. And
all the places you can find podcasts. Go look at the Nintendo Shack.
Under the rock.
As for me, you can find me on Twitter at Ryan Turford. You can find us on YouTube at youtube.com/carpoolgaming, on Twitter at twitter.com/carpoolgaming, on podcast services around the globe. So, for Garrett Bland, I'm Ryan Turford. This has been the 49th level of the RPG Cave. Only one more level before level 50, and we're out.
Job advancement. Bye-bye.